Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Wednesday, June 26, 2013 here. Tomorrow, we're just a week away from July 4th. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about today, a lot of things going on in the world. The stock markets are up. They're out there rigging this thing just as hard as they can to keep this whole fraud, illusion, matrix going just a little tiny bit longer, but they can't keep that up forever. Manny is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble here. We've been trading messages about how all of our equipment is breaking down here. I have to go buy a new keyboard on one of these machines here. Actually, I have to buy a new hard drive, which is annoying as all get out here. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. And noticing today, the corporate media has definitely gone back to a campaign of conditization. And if you remember, that word comes from Gary Condit, whose illicit affair and possible murder of Chandra Levy was the dominating news story in the opening months of the year 2001. Meanwhile, our government was already informing in March and April of that year that the United States would be going to war against Afghanistan in October. We didn't get that news from the U.S. government. We got all Gary Condit all the time. And so when the events of 9/11 happened, it was a complete surprise, under shock, and the next thing you know, we were off onto that already planned war in Afghanistan here. So ever since then, every time the media is trying to distract you, we call it conditization. And they're out there, they're trying to press all the hot-button issues out there: gay, marriage, abortion, racism. You would almost think it's an election year from how hard they're pounding the fringe issues. And I don't mean to take anything away from people for whom these issues are important, but those are narrow segments of the demographic, and these are issues that do not in any way challenge the primary agenda of the nation, which is propping up our private central bank and starting these wars of conquest all over the globe here. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that further on, but we're going to start with our daily recap of the current news on Floodgate. And, of course, we're going to start with Benghazi, which I still see as the biggest, deepest, darkest, ugliest secret that they're trying as hard as they can to make go away. The House has issued 4 subpoenas to the State Department. They're getting people in for this testimonial there, and trying to find out what's really going on. And the news is coming out worse and worse for the Obama administration and the State Department, because they're basically confirming there were armed forces within easy distance of the consulate who could have intervened and protected the lives of the ambassador. And this Benghazi attack went on for over 8 hours. And they were ordered to stand down. Now, they still don't know who gave that stand-down order or who authorized it. I think an order like that, yeah, let the bad guys attack the consulate and kill our ambassador, that's sort of an order that has to come from the very top. And so Dempsey is basically out there saying, we could have intervened. We could have stopped them. We were told not to. Now, looking at the coverage of the Benghazi hearings in the corporate media, they're trying to frame this as wholly in terms of what do we do the next time. We don't need to look at what actually happened at Benghazi. Oh, no. That's how much of the taxpayers' money must we spend to be better prepared for the next time? And it reminds me a lot of the official investigation into 9/11, which focused entirely on intelligence failures, meaning justifying more tax money for the involved agencies, and never actually looked at the evidence who was really behind that attack. This is Spin Cycle Central. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Edward Snowden, they're basically scapegoating him, they're demonizing him, they're smearing him. But behind that is a very obvious agenda to make Snowden the story of the NSA. Was he a traitor? Should he go to jail? Where is he hiding? And obviously keeping the focus on Snowden in order to discourage people or lure them away or trick them from thinking about what Snowden was actually revealing to the American people. And by the way, I noticed Ron Paul is out there saying the same thing I was saying the other day on the show. For the U.S. government to be charging Snowden with treason, which is aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war, when Snowden revealed this information to the American public, shows that the U.S. federal government already has a mindset. They are at war with the American people, with the 50 states. Very, very alarming. Now, we are seeing across the blogosphere and the independent media more and more people coming out and saying Edward Snowden is not the real issue. And the hunt for Snowden and the potential trip to Guantanamo and waterboarding and the rest of it that Obama and John Kerry would like to visit on him is not the issue. The issue is the government spying on everything, on everybody, all the time, in complete open defiance of the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America, spying on you millions of times every single day without our consent. Nobody asked for permission for them to come into my computer and mess around with things, listen to my phone calls, listen to read the text messages my wife and I send back to each other. You do not have your consent to look at that. We are not committing a crime, and under the Fourth Amendment, you do not have permission to be in there. And we need to keep the focus on that. The criminal here is not Edward Snowden. The criminal here is a government that refuses to play by the rules under which we, the people, allow them to be the government. Now, of course, Snowden was working here in Hawaii on the island of Oahu when he did whatever it was he did. And by the way, they already have a job ad up for his replacement. Send your CV, come be an internet specialist here. Somehow, I don't think I'd get the security clearance to get that job. But on a more serious note, the NSA thinks that Snowden copied pretty much everything regarding what they're doing to the American people and to law-abiding people around the world here. And apparently this information is now deposited in several locations, and it will all be dumped publicly should anything unfortunate happen to Edward Snowden, like his Mercedes explode in a ball of flame and then run into a tree, which is the latest eyewitness report regarding Michael Hastings here. And it occurred to me, we've talked many, many times before about these wonderful little spy coins that one of our former advertisers makes. And I can't, there's one. Right here, little tiny nickel, and it's hollowed out in the middle, and inside is enough space for a micro SD card that will hold 64 gigabytes of data. And so, I understand that starting tomorrow, all of you employees for the National Security Agency, in order to discourage more leaks, will be required to report to work totally naked. So you don't have any spare change in your pocket that might be hiding little SD cards on which you can confiscate material from the government. So you NSA workers, talk about casual Friday. It's going to be completely naked from now on because that's how little they trust you in the wake of the Snowden scandal here. On a more serious note, and this is not a joke, if you are a member of the United States military and you were deployed anywhere in the world and you communicated with your families, your wives, your children, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever, the NSA was listening to it all along. And you should be offended by that. Because you people in the military, you put on that uniform. You obeyed the orders of the government to go out and pour white-hot flaming death over innocent people in foreign countries that had not attacked us. You did as you were told. You displayed loyalty. You kept your promises to that government, and this is how the government rewards that loyalty and duty and service. They listened into every one of your phone calls, all of your text messages, all your mail. How does that make you feel? Meanwhile, of course, the NSA has been embarrassed by yet another lie. And apparently they put out this fact sheet on the PRISM Internet spying program that flat out lied about privacy protections. They put out this little notice saying, oh, we're not looking at this, and we don't do this, and we don't do that. And it's already been exposed as a complete load of codswallop, claptrap, USDA choice bovine excrement. Except the USDA inspectors are on furlough because of trying to balance the budget here. And we still have these 2 U.S. senators saying the NSA is still lying. It's like a takeoff on that old joke. How do you tell when a politician's lying? Their lips move. Same thing applies to the NSA. These are people who institutionally cannot tell the truth about what they're doing. And, of course, they think it's all national security. We can't tell the people what we're doing. We're serving a higher authority. We serve a noble purpose. No, you're not. According to another of the NSA whistleblowers, Russell Tice, you're out there getting dirt on politicians so they can be blackmailed. How does that serve America? How does that protect the Republic? How does that protect our national security when you completely undermine the democratic process by going out and poking into the private lives of officials and politicians and judges and lawyers and heads of major corporations? You tell me how that serves America, how it makes our nation stronger, more prosperous, how it makes us a moral leader on planet Earth. I'll bet you can't come up with that rationalization, not without at least a case of scotch. Now, the NSA is responding to all this criticism and questioning with the usual fallback that we get from these alphabet agencies. The NSA is saying they can neither confirm or deny anything without causing exceptionally grave damage to national security, which is nonsense. The secret's already out. They could confirm, yeah, we're listening to your phone calls. How does that cause grave national damage to national security when everybody already knows it's going on? The exceptionally grave damage isn't to national security. It's to the people who work at the NSA, who are rapidly becoming almost as hated and reviled as the TSA and the IRS. Now, as far as where Snowden is going, we're still getting all these conflicting stories, and I think probably Snowden himself is sowing as much confusion as he can, because he knows the NSA can't actually track him through all the data networks, despite movies like, Public Enemy and TV shows like 24 and Eagle Eye and all the rest of that stuff, where they just type your name into a computer and instantly everything about you is available, including your location, and they can turn the security camera and watch you. Apparently, that doesn't really exist. They're not able to do that. And so Snowden, I think, is out there, feeding out this false information. I'm going to Cuba. I'm going to Ecuador. I'm going to whatever. Ecuador, in response to the rumored application for asylum, is demanding the United States submit in writing its justification for this international spy operation, and its justification for why Ecuador should be in any way obligated to return Snowden back to the United States. I think Snowden ought to go to Iceland myself. That's just a personal thing here. Now, an interesting story surfaced the other day. This was over in the lead blogs over at the New York Times. Apparently, while Snowden was talking to his lawyers regarding extradition from China and so forth, Snowden apparently told the lawyers to put all their cell phones inside the refrigerator where he was staying as a means to block any eavesdropping. And technically that can work, because the sides of the refrigerator would block the signal. Obviously, you don't want to leave your smartphone in there too long, because when you take it out, moisture will condense on it, and that might compromise the phone. You can use your microwave oven, because that is designed to be a radio shield, so that the microwaves don't cook the chef. Obviously, take the phone out before you heat up that macaroni and cheese here. Now, for myself, up until now, when I'm not using my smartphone, I put it on top of this old AM radio tuned to a religious station to make them listen to that all night long. But I had a great idea this morning. I'm going to get an old porn video tape, whatever. I'm going to take the soundtrack off of that and have it on a loop playing into my phone when I'm not using it. So as the NSA supervisors are walking down the cubicles, they're going to hear porn coming out of the computers, and they're going to scream at their workers, "How dare you listen to porn when you're on the taxpayer dollar? We're not supposed to be doing it." We'll get some of these guys in trouble. What do you think? Good idea? Call in, let me know, 800-313-9443. Now, the situation in terms of tyranny is getting even worse out there. Lindsey Graham, who never met a freedom he did not hate, is now out there saying the time has come for the United States government to open, read, and censor your paper postal mail. Because with the revelation of electronics eavesdropping, people with something to hide are going to just type it up on an old typewriter and send it through the regular postal mail. And Lindsey Graham says we can't have that. The government has to start opening and reading all of the citizens' postal mail. I thought that was a felony, and it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and as we mentioned before, a lot of suspicion around the strange death of reporter Michael Hastings, who was working on a story about CIA and NSA spying on all of you, and all of a sudden his Mercedes just exploded into huge fireball and then rammed into a tree. And that's the word we're getting from the witnesses that are starting, more and more witnesses coming out to say, I actually saw that. And it does make sense the car exploded before it hit the tree, because otherwise the engine and transmission wouldn't have wound up, 100 feet down the road, because the tree would have been in the way. And so it looks like we're in the era of a little bit of wet work out there. Michael Hastings' wife is absolutely convinced that he was done in by dirty deeds, done cheap, and she's vowing to take down whoever did this. And I wish her luck, but, people who stand up there and say, I'm going to find who did this to my whatever, very often wind up in accidents themselves. And I remember a classic case going all the way back to the John F. Kennedy assassination. Dorothy Kilgallen, who was telling friends she had absolute hard evidence that the U.S. government and other players were behind the assassination of John F. Kennedy, died mysteriously. And then her partner died just 30 days later. So, Mrs. Hastings, please be very, very careful. All righty, let's see. We got a couple of phone calls here. Dave in Oklahoma. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, aloha, Mike. Yeah, I liked your idea about the audio porno to run through your phone when you're not using it.
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple of ideas. One of them, excuse me, the Barney theme song. Didn't they use that as a form of torture in Abu Ghraib?
Oh, you're right. And the screaming rabbits and the rest of that. Yeah, that'd be a real. There's payback for you.
I had one idea too. Another one was some of the war scene, the machine guns, the big naval guns, the howitzers.
Oh, but these guys love that stuff. They're at the forefront of bringing Big Mistake Number 3 into reality. They love that stuff. They go home and watch that stuff.
Yeah, if you had 30-second loop of that, though, going over and over, especially through the night, good night. But at any rate, yeah, I thought that was a good idea you had there.
Okay.
I'm just happy to hide mine in a tin can.
Well, but, again, I think the idea of having something there like a radio, in fact, even better is, find a really radical radio station, that's using all the buzzwords that the computers trip off for, and just jam the system that way.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. Or, but maybe a 10, 15-second loop of AJ at his best.
Now that's getting picky. That's getting petty. We don't want to go there. I'm sorry. We don't need to be trashing other on-air hosts. Anyway, anything else?
No. Hey, thanks, Mike. You're doing a great job. Keep it up.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I liked your opening, particularly about the NSA, and the idea that the only way they could explain this system away is using a case of scotch. The problem with that is, of course, they probably use their credit card and put it on the taxpayer bill.
Oh, they definitely would do that. I mean, they caught the IRS using their taxpayer-paid-for credit cards to buy online porn, expensive lunches, clothes for their children. And I thought it was really funny where one of the IRS employees who was caught doing this, said he'd lost his government credit card and it needed to be replaced, but he'd already done that like 5 times. It's just completely out of control.
The other idea you had of playing porn over your phone.
Yes.
Problem with that idea, of course, it would save the taxpayer money, so let's all get on board with it. I mean, they wouldn't need to use their credit card for the porn.
You know, that's absolutely right. There is a way to balance the budget. We send free porn to all these government workers, not just the NSA, the SEC. They got caught watching online porn when they were supposed to be out there keeping an eye on Wall Street. Yeah, good idea. We can lower the cost of government by sending them all free porn.
There we go. I mean, if this wasn't so serious, it'd be a big joke, wouldn't it? I mean, absolutely.
Well, we got to take this all with a sense of humor, because otherwise the enormity of what is going on in this country can become very much overwhelming. And so every once in a while we got to lighten it up and we got to look for the funny stuff. And remember, laughter kills fear. The government wants us to be afraid, and if we're laughing at them, of course, that whole fear agenda turns into an epic fail, which I think it already has.
Yeah, I mean, nobody believes anything. But the other thing is, of course, now that as things progress, it turns out that the main transatlantic cable, the fiber optic cable between Europe and America now is totally under the eyes of the GCHQ, which is passing all the information around to its favored little spy agencies.
Everybody's tapping everybody's cable. Stay on the phone, John. I'm going to come back to you after the commercial break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're talking with John in Barbados and the to-be-expected revelation that the undersea fiber optic and conventional metal cables are, in fact, all being tapped. And there's nothing new about that. There's a very interesting gentleman who lives on the island of Oahu named Dr. John P. Craven. You've probably seen him on TV. He's a very famous individual. He was a key player in the hunt for the lost U.S. submarine, the Scorpion. And he's really an expert at finding lost objects underwater. He was involved with the search for the missing nuclear weapons over in the Mediterranean. And he wrote a book a while back called The Silent War. And he talks about all the undersea or all the espionage that's done using submarines. He was involved in the early attempts to recover that sunken Russian submarine off here to the northwest. And his book does include this story about an American submarine that snuck into Russian waters up by the Kamchatka Peninsula and succeeded in wrapping a tapping device around one of the Russian military undersea cables there. Unfortunately, if you remember that John Walker spy scandal, it's thought that the existence of that tap was revealed to the Russians by John Walker. They hauled up the cable, they took the phone tap off, and apparently for a long while it was on display in the Moscow Museum. So, yeah, they've been doing this all along. John?
Yeah, Michael. The other comment I wanted to make was this latest comment by the Kenyan who pretends to be the president. He lives in the White House, I believe.
Yes. His
it's
most
about
excellency.
the climate change. The climate change. And he's calling everybody who thinks that this climate change is not man-made, but is natural, are flat earthers.
Yeah, that's a bit of a reach there. I mean, when you consider that there's absolutely no scientific foundation for any of Obama's claims, he's out there saying, anybody who doesn't agree with me, you're all kooks and nuts and flat earthers, and it's not going to work. Because this kind of smearing illusion is something that's just been overused to death and nobody cares. I mean, for a while they were trying to equate climate deniers with Holocaust deniers, and it's just, that kind of propaganda doesn't work any longer. And it's rather amazing. I think it reveals just how desperate Obama is to try and distract the nation from Floodgate, that he's going back to climate change even though it's been pretty much discredited. We've had all these harsh winters in a row. The Arctic sea ice extent is now at a new record. There is no scientific support for these claims of carbon dioxide controlling the Earth's climate. Obama's out there saying that he's going to promise to control Earth's temperature within a single degree. We know the sun is the dominant factor in Earth's climate, so Obama apparently thinks in his little SSRI-addled mind that he is more powerful than the sun. In other words, the United States is being ruled by a new sun king.
Well, I've taken to calling him the Kenyan in the White House, but the pretender.
Well,
however,
yeah, hang on before you
however,
go before you go any further. Hang a second, John. I don't care what his ancestry is. This nonsense about the birth certificate, they're still waving it around as a distraction. Obama was born here in Hawaii. Now, I agree, the issue that he applied for financial aid in college as a foreign student was underhanded and unethical, but it's not a confession that he wasn't born in the United States of America. We've already explained what that birth certificate nonsense is. Barack Obama's real father is Frank Marshall Davis, and when when Obama's mother married Barack Obama Sr., they simply reissued a new birth certificate. And by the way, back in the 1960s, that was a very common thing. When a woman had a love child, remember the 60s and the summer of love and the autumn of gonorrhea, we're simply going back and saying, can we get a new birth certificate for the correct name? And they'd say, yeah, sure, here, no problem. That was done a lot, done an awful lot. It's no big deal. Anyway, please continue with what you wanted to go on with next.
Yeah, there are many things that are troubling, but it's all such a joke. I mean, these people cannot be serious. The Congress is well. I'm just dumbfounded. I'm lost for words.
Well, all Obama is doing is right now he's desperate for distractions from Benghazi Gate, IRS Gate, DOJ Gate, and all the rest of that. He's going to go with whatever works. If he thought the American people would buy aliens invading from space, he'd go with that. Members of Congress are thinking only in terms of what is going to bring more money into their pockets, either through their stock investments or through campaign and lobbyist donations. That's it. That explains everything.
I honestly think that you're quite correct. They're using Edward Snowden as a distraction from the actual surveillance of not just America, but right around the planet. And people, I think this is the issue that America can now beat the government over the head with because people are so angry about it.
Oh, they absolutely are. They absolutely are. Everybody I've talked to since this thing came out, I mean, you can just see it in their face that they're just furious about this. If this was intended to get out in order to scare Americans into silent complacency, it has absolutely failed. And it's
completely backfired.
It completely backfired. And again, I think these White House people, they're all on SSRIs because their decision-making is just so flat-out poor. And they're making mistake after mistake after mistake, and they're clearly misjudging the mood of the American people. They're seriously, seriously out of touch with ordinary, regular, mainstream, coast-to-coast America.
Yeah, and as I say, I mean, I know we all look at 9/11 as a government assisted operation, but that's not what people are focusing on. The anger that the people feel on this surveillance society is the one that needs to be concentrated on in all the media, so that we can beat this government over the head. And my government, by the way.
Yeah, your government too. You're part of it. The gang of five that started all of this with Echelon. All of them need to be beaten with it. But the real value of this revelation of the NSA scandal is all of this stuff that went before 9/11 didn't really affect you if you weren't living in New York. TSA crotch groping didn't really affect you unless you were traveling, and then only when you were traveling. Lies about all of this stuff affected only a small subset of Americans. Now we have a scandal where every single American understands it personally affected them. All the military people making love talk to their wives over those communication systems from the forward deployment, they were being listened to. People's business secrets being stolen. IRS is a scandal mostly to the people who got targeted. Department of Justice is mostly a scandal to those reporters who got targeted. This NSA PRISM scandal touches every single living American who has a wire or a fiber coming into their lives anywhere. And so, yeah, they're very, very angry about that. But at the same time, while we want to continue to call attention to it, we should use this as an opportunity to lead people back into these other scandals. I mean, since that revelation about TWA 800 a week ago, where the official investigators were ordered by the government to lie to the American people about the cause of the crash of TW-800. Now people are getting interested, and they're going back and looking at a lot of stuff. They're looking at 9/11 and, amazing timing. Artisan Engineers for 9/11 Truth are getting ready to launch a major billboard campaign this fall in as many cities in the United States as they can find to get their little signs and billboards up to remind everybody there was a third building that came down on 9/11 that the government doesn't want to talk about because they can't explain away how it simply fell into its own footprint looking like a controlled demolition. And I know on my server logs, my 9/11 pages are being read more. People are getting curious. I think we've reached the point where the American population as a whole has all of a sudden had that wake-up call that this government is not what they were taught it was in those state-controlled schools. And so now's the time to get all that stuff back out. November is going to be the 50th anniversary of the John F. Kennedy assassination. And people are talking about that. And the government's already afraid. The mayor of Dallas has already said there will be no public demonstrations allowed in Dealey Plaza on the anniversary of the assassination. Because they know people are going to show up with signs saying Oswald was framed. It was, CIA and Mossad and organized crime and the Texas oil billionaires and the private central bankers were all behind this assassination. And so the government is actually on the defensive here. They've lost the initiative. And Obama's grabbing of human-caused global warming as an attempt to distract from it is a purely reactive move.
Information should be, if this Prism and Echelon and all the rest of it is reality and they've been saving all this data, obviously, the reality and the truth about this thing is within the CIA, NSA archives. I mean, we need to get at those archives.
That would be an amazing resource for future historians, but my guess is probably that the most sensitive information is located on something which they turn a key and it's instantly erased. Because that's how these things get handled. Yeah. Anyway, John, I need to get off and get on to some other calls. Phone lines are loading up. Mike in Kentucky. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, along the same lines of surveilling everybody and profiling, I just stumbled across something. Of course, you remember the fake likes that showed up on Facebook from dead people even?
Oh, yeah. All the political candidates are doing that. Not just on Facebook. They're faking their Twitter followers, and it's a huge cottage industry to go out and create 5,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 followers for politicians.
All right.
When Hillary put up her Twitter account for her 2016 presidential run, and the next day it had 500,000 Twitter followers, I don't think anybody bought that one.
Okay, well, what I'm using that for is a reference here, and in the case of these likes, the way some people proved it was people that had passed on, but their profile was still up there, and all of a sudden people started seeing likes from them after they were dead, and so Facebook was generating those. Now, what I've noticed is they're always revamping and shuffling Facebook around, and now they have this related groups sidebar over to the side, and I noticed on one of my groups that there was a group there that they said was related, and it had nothing to do with my group at all. It was a dominatrix she-male clothing group, and I had 8 friends in this thing that were listed as being in it. Well, knowing enough about how to navigate around, I went to their profile and their wall and went down in their groups, and it's not listed. They were putting church business, well, in one case it was the local businessman, and a bunch of women were in this group, that one of which was an elderly lady who's been ill for a long time. There's no way she was she's from, I know somebody that goes to church with her, or did go to church with her, and she wasn't in that group, but Facebook advertised she's in the dominatrix she-male clothing group.
Okay, now let's be fair here. That may not be Facebook itself. Remember, we reported some months back that the U.S. government is spending millions and millions of your tax dollars on special software where every single hired online propagandist can be running up to 100 phony identities. And because of recent efforts by Facebook and Twitter to shut down obviously fake credentials, they're trying to confirm that there are real people out there, it stands to reason this software is going out and mining identities that can be used for fake likes or fake dislikes or so forth and so on. So it may not be Facebook itself.
Another aspect of this, though, is that people see that, 8 of my friends are in this group, then I'm gonna join it. And so it's a social engineering thing to see what they can tempt you into or find what your proclivities are for later blackmail or marketing. So.
Well, you know how that's not going to work is if everybody goes out and likes really bizarre stuff. You know, if every Facebook user went out and, linked to one of these bizarre groups or something. Again, I don't know why they think Facebook is going to be a realistic, accurate source of raw intelligence. Everybody exaggerates on social media. People accidentally click buttons. Now we know from what your phone call is telling us that a lot of these lines of communication and connection are completely bogus to begin with. The NSA has spent billions and billions of your tax dollars. I'm starting to sound like Carl Sagan. Billions and billions of your tax dollars wafting into the cosmic black hole of the NSA. And it's useless. It's completely useless. They have got a yottabyte of completely useless junk.
Unfortunately, though, there is a lot of people in this country that don't understand the subtleties of Facebook, and they're like our cousins, the trees, to also quote Carl Sagan. They're barely with us. They don't.
Well,
keep up with
I
the
gotta
likes
be
of
honest.
you and me.
I gotta be honest. I use Facebook to promote posts from my website, and other than that, I don't go over there at all. When I first signed up, I put in a couple of old pictures of my wife and I going out to Catalina Island from years and years ago. And we don't even look like that anymore. And other than that, I don't waste time on social media because I've got other fun things to be doing. Yes.
There's so many people, though, that don't realize they go on there and they just spill their guts. They put their whole family tree on there, and it's just silly.
Yeah, and the identity thieves use that. And I know some years ago in a project I did with my uncle, my father's youngest brother, we were putting together a page about the Rivero family, and then a lot of the Rivero family members called and said, no, take us out of there because somebody can use that information to steal our identity, and we basically erased half the family off of this GEDCOM chart here. Mike, I got to let you go.
Sure.
We got a bunch of other callers here I want to get to. We're going to switch over to Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Kyle. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. But of good news, as I'm sure you've heard, the new Microsoft Xbox, which had to initially always be online, reporting back to Microsoft's home office once an hour with the Connect sensor, which can pick up to 6 people in a room and distinguish their voices. Because of Sony not having any of these online requirements, the Xbox was being out pre-ordered up to 15 to 1. And in an unprecedented move, Microsoft has now completely reversed basically the entire software package of their new Xbox and is now requiring none of the online component, none of the Kinect, none of the DRM, and will remain exactly as an offline console now because there was such a pushback. And if I think that shows one thing for sure, it's that the power of the purse is still king in this country.
Well, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. And, with all this, I don't want these gadgets in my home. First of all, I'm not a big fan of computer gaming, even though it used to be a major part of my my work when I was back in computer animation. We got to take a break for commercials here. And Kyle, stick around. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're still talking with Kyle in Pennsylvania. And Kyle, did you have anything more you wanted to add to the discussion?
Well, I just wanted to say that the malevolence of the Xbox One cannot be understated. The reason why it's called the Xbox One, even though it's the third iteration of the Xbox, is because Microsoft's grand plan was that this would be the one piece of equipment for your home, for your TV, your computer. There's prototypes out there for something called Luminosity, which pretty much scans your home. There was apps that could be tied into ADT security systems. And the fact that they spent upwards of $200 million developing this piece of equipment to now pretty much have to scrap the entire firmware.
Well, hang on. I think we need to be very cautious that Microsoft is actually, in fact, changing anything inside that box, because at this particular point, this close to the release, they'd missed their release date. I don't care what Microsoft says, and they may allow you to play on the box without being connected to the net, but the instant you connect to the net, this Xbox could be saving all this data for that one moment you do plug in. And I know all this technology seems to have advantages, and it does, because that's the sugar coating they're putting around the rat poison here. But in a country where we absolutely cannot trust the government and corporations to mind their own business, I don't want to buy these products, and I won't buy these products. And I'm turning into an actual Luddite in my old age. Forget smartphones. I'm going to go back to 2 Dixie cups and a wax string.
Previous to last week's reversal on their part, the president of Xbox, Tom Matrick, was making statements like, if you do not have this box constantly connected to the internet, this system is not for you. We have another system called the XP, which is the current generation. The idea of this was they were forcing the issue that if you wanted to play this console, you must be connected all the time online. And you're absolutely right. All those backdoors and all those abilities for you, information and data packets to be forwarded back to Microsoft, are still there. The main difference is now you are not forced to do that. If you want to never connect this to the internet, you have that option now. Previously, if you wanted to turn the system on, it had to have a high-speed connection to the internet.
I have a question for the people at Microsoft and the NSA. Do they really think terrorists are sitting there playing computer games?
Well, it's really a matter of, they want to be able to, I don't know if they're necessarily using it for NSA matters. I'm sure that there is some level of that, but it's to track you. It's to see what you're playing, what you're watching, what they can put out next year that will be the top selling thing.
Okay. Kyle, got to cut you off. We got to take a station identification. And I understand a lot of this tracking is all about marketing information. But again, we do have a right to privacy. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm looking at the corporate media, and it's all Trayvon Martin all the time. This is the new form of conditization. Forget about you're being spied on. Forget about a government that violates the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Forget about the IRS targeting Obama's political enemies. We have a racist charged murder trial to wave at you, and they're out there wagging the Trayvon just as absolutely hard as they can. We're going to go back to the phones here. We've got Danny in South Carolina. Aloha, Danny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I've got a short, bizarre story to relate to you, and I almost didn't call because it's just so flaky. But I got a letter here from Senator Graham. And it says, thank you for taking time to contact me about immigration reform. Now, I have a kind of a relationship with Lindsey Graham. I send him emails, and he sends me letters that don't quite answer my question. But
yeah, that's sort of normal practice for the United States Congress.
But on this occasion, you see, I did not contact him. And I thought about it, and I went back and I checked my emails, and I logged all my blogs and everything, so I keep a record of all this just in case. But I did not contact him about immigration reform. What I did do is I got a call from, I think it's called Numbers USA. It's an automated call that says there's a bill going up to be voted on. If you want to talk to your senator, press 1, and we'll call him, and, you can make a comment. Well, I did that, but I did not give my name. And, nobody asked me for my name or phone number. It was just an answering machine.
Well, no, so they probably had your phone number at the other end. They called you, right? So obviously they had your phone number. And
yeah,
with all this sharing of data, they had the names and number. Now, there's another thing that you need to be aware of, and this gets back to the whole issue of grassroots lobbying and some of the abuses of public relations firms. There are entire public relations companies that do nothing but manufacture phony email, letter, and campaigns with which to bamboozle legislators about public support or opposition for certain issues. And I remember seeing a documentary on one of these companies, and I can't remember the name of the company. It was something communications, and it was this office where they had this whole wall full of cubby holes with all different kinds of paper stationery and cutesy personalized envelopes with flowers and kittens and the rest of it. And they had these printers that were set up to use typefaces that looked like typewriters. Every different brand of typewriter was in there. And what they would do is they would take names and addresses of people living in the district for this member of Congress, and they would literally generate 1,000 pieces of postal mail and drive around town, throw them in different mailboxes. And so the member of Congress would arrive at his office, and there'd be a huge pile of mail on his desk, all looking like it came from different areas within his own district, different envelopes, different typefaces, and different signatures, and he would be convinced that there was overwhelming support in his district for whatever it was he was being encouraged to vote for. And that's another way of corporate fraud to hijack the Congress, and it is technically, sadly, illegal under the current lobbying laws. Lobbyists who directly approach members of Congress have to identify themselves and say, I am a lobbyist for Hill and Knowlton or whatever. But these little private grassroots lobbying operations don't have to identify themselves, and that is actually legal as well. We're coming up here on a commercial break. I know we got another phone call here. Danny, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And Aloha America, welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go right back to the telephones. Paul in Michigan. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Mr. Rivero. Yes, I'm calling about, I guess, the Verizon and Yahoo and Google and them operating on behalf of the NSA, spying on Americans. I just want to say, in regard to fascism, for a long time I never really believed you that we live in a fascist state, but you convinced me of that, so I believe you now, and I think that was a big thing for me at least. But what I want to, especially with the revolving door between government and corporations, and especially with banking and internet and media, it's obvious that we live in a fascist state. But the one thing about fascism that America lacks in the West, I think, is this concept of nationalism. At least the people from the 20s, 30s, 40s, who we call fascists, were nationalists, and they actually stood up for their countries, respectively. Germany, Italy, even Japan to some extent.
Well, it was a very different world back then, in that there was no global consumer-level mass media. And that is really what has changed here. The people who got suckered into going along with Mussolini or going along with Hitler or going along with Tojo, all they ever heard was the official government pronouncement of what was supposed to be going on, and they believed their governments. But those days when governments can do that and get away with it are gone. And I think that's why you're absolutely correct. This fierce sense of nationalism, even though our schools and corporate media are still trying to reinforce that, it did not take hold, because the fundamental nature of information flow through society has changed dramatically since the advent of the Internet. And we're not going to go back. No more than they were able to rewind from when Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing. They're not going to be able to go back. And either, those ruling structures that are able to evolve and adjust to the new environment will survive, and those institutions that can't adapt, particularly those institutions carrying a burden of 200 years of accumulated lies, are doomed to collapse.
Sure. One quick question, but do you think there should be a new definition of this global fascism where these people don't care about an individual country and their people, but they only care about the whole globalist agenda? Because obviously Obama doesn't care about the average American, neither does the leaders of England care about the average British citizen, That's what I guess I'm asking.
No, you're absolutely right. And this plan for a new world order with a global banking system based on another private central bank issuing that global currency as a loan at interest, it is fascistic in nature. This new world order is a fascist system. And, you know, if they succeed in getting it completely in place, the goal and the result will be the permanent enslavement of all mankind to artificially created illusions of debt for the rest of time, until the sun swallows our planet.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Okay, let's see. Now, big news today. The Supreme Court came out striking down the Defense of Marriage Act, which discriminated against same-sex marriage. And they've been wagging that all over. And, you know, I agree with this one. If you're opposed to gay marriage, don't marry a gay. Problem solved. And it's astounding how much time, energy, money has been just wasted on this whole idea of this group of people over here reading, you know, their parchments from these goat herders from 2,000 years ago, screaming that these other people over here are somehow bad and evil, and they've got to be constrained to conform to the lifestyle set forth by aforesaid goat herders all this time ago. But it makes a great political distraction, and that's what they're using it for. Because right now, the U.S. government and the corporate media lackeys, the prostitutes, are desperate to take your attention away from the IRS targeting of Obama's political opponents, the Department of Justice spying on the corporate media reporters to make sure they're not going to report anything the government doesn't like, the EPA playing favorites with green groups, the big one of NSA spying, and PRISM, just complete open defiance of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And, of course, Benghazi, which was this staged election season publicity stunt that went horribly, horribly wrong. Now, getting back to this other situation, there's an interesting story coming out of New Jersey. It turns out the ACLU is filing a lawsuit over the fact that the state of New Jersey is awarding more than $11 million in taxpayer funds to 2 religious schools that teach nothing but religious dogma and instruction, clergy, priesthood, whatever you want to call them. And first of all, these institutions have a tax-exempt status, and because of the First Amendment, that, you know, separation of church and state, the government shouldn't be taking your tax money to give to any religious institution. And the ACLU, I think, is making a very important, valid point here. Going to grab another phone call here. Vladimir in San Antonio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. As always, you have a wonderful program here in the afternoon.
Thank you.
I was curious, are you familiar with a company, a corporate company? I believe they have ties to the government, but I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Yelp?
I've heard of them. I haven't spent a lot of time with them.
Okay, I have 2 questions. First one, have you read reports? I have read reports that there are people from Yelp who work for government, and they are purposely trying to hurt a small business. If you Google, people complain about Yelp all the time, that they're hurting business. So my first question, have you heard that people from government are purposely doing this?
I don't know about intentionally harming businesses, but at this point, again, we're seeing political opponents to the Obama administration being targeted for harassment, denial of their tax-exempt status. We already know from the Seattle APEC conference that government intelligence agencies funded by your tax dollars go in and steal business secrets from unfavored businessmen and give them to favored businessmen. And so the idea of using these backdoors into all of our computers to conduct economic sabotage against political enemies, can't rule it out. Certainly can't rule it out.
And then I was curious, if you do the research, I don't know if you have time or not, but if you do the research for this corporate company, they are corporate, they have stock Yelp, do you think then you will acknowledge at least that you're on a Jew-hating network?
Okay, here we go. Thank you very much. You know, every time we touch on 9/11, we get one of those phone calls. Every time we touch on 9/11, we get one of those phone calls. We haven't talked about the Jews in this entire show. I haven't gotten to Israel yet. But we talk about 9/11, and boom, man, quick, call over to RBN and scream they're a Jew-hating network. Oh, man. Predictable. Very predictable. I should have placed a cash bet on that. When I talked about 9/11, I should have said, I'm willing to bet a plug Turkish piastre we get a Jew-hating network call. All righty. Moving on to more serious things. Have you ever noticed a tendency by the government to make an announcement that the economy is doing really great, and then a couple of months later they say, well, we have to adjust the numbers. It wasn't quite as good, but we're gonna lower the numbers a little bit toward reality, but we've got new inflated numbers to reassure you everything is doing really great, which reminds me the plunge protection team is doing their job. They've got the Dow almost back to 15,000. Looks like they're going for the gold in the final hour before the closing bell here. But the U.S. government has had to revise downward the gross domestic product for the first quarter of this year. And there are two aspects to this. First of all, it's proving austerity isn't working. For the same reason it didn't work in Greece or any of the other countries where it was tried. And remember, it came out. The spreadsheet model on which austerity was based as public policy in all these countries turned out to have a calculation error in it. They didn't double-check this spreadsheet. Factors weren't completely left out. There were mistakes in the equations. And nobody went through and actually checked it before it was used to justify the policy of austerity. So this declining GDP proves that all this austerity and money into the banks and Wall Street isn't actually recovering the economy. In fact, there's a study out now that 85% of all this instantly created money from the Federal Reserve poured all over Wall Street, 85% of it is still in the pockets of the Wall Street people. It did not flow back out into the economy to stimulate the economy, mostly because those bankers wanted to loan it back out at interest. That's what all these bailouts are, taking trillions from the American people and giving it to the banks so the banks can loan it back to the American people at interest. And we all realize what a completely nonsensical deal that is. So getting back to the fact that they're now hemming and hawing and backpedaling and saying, the first quarter GDP, it wasn't really all that good. And the reason that's important is because consumer spending in this country is still a major driver of our economy, and the GDP number is directly related to that. And we're looking, consumer spending is drying up. You go around all the stores and they're selling, 50% off, and they're all getting ready for the 4th of July sales. Like, we celebrate our independence by buying a new coffee machine at 20% off. And it's a harbinger of reduced earnings. And yet, of course, the stock market is still going up. Gold is still going down. They're dumping paper contracts all over Wall Street like it's confetti. And we've already reached a point where they can't satisfy those gold contracts. They have to settle them for cash plus premium. It's all fraud, and it can't last. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm already getting emails coming in about that last Jew hater call. You're a Jew hater. You're an anti-Semite. You're a Hitler lover. Don't you dare mention 9/11. They're running scared. They are running scared. And they don't know what to do. All the old propaganda tricks don't work anymore. I'm sure they're beating their head against the wall and say, we were told if we call you an anti-Semite, you would stop talking. No. Doesn't work. Oh, my goodness. All right, back to the economy, because the economy is something that does affect each and every one of us. The latest study is finding out 75% of Americans are just one financial emergency away from being homeless. Record number of Americans on food stamps. Of course, the government likes that. If you have to go to the government to get your food, then you'll just sit there and do as you're told. And I remember when I was a kid, we lived in a nation where most people had savings in the bank. If they had a medical emergency or a meteor fell on their house or something, and the insurance didn't cover it all, they could roll with the punches. They could survive. We had stability. We had resilience. And this fascist banking system has resulted in a nation where everybody is living paycheck to paycheck, from food stamp to food stamp. We see that here on the island of Oahu with these two food programs my wife and I are involved in. The food stamps don't even make it all the way through the month. And the government seems to think that's really kind of cool. All righty, now, we have been following over the last week this scandal where these leaked emails revealed that the big Wall Street ratings agencies that were giving AAA ratings to all these fraudulent mortgage-backed security bundles were paid to do it. Over and above the fees they get from these issuing financial institutions, they were paid a little bit under the table to put a AAA rating on these things. And Egan-Jones, the one Wall Street rating agency paid by the investor, who was very critical of some of these ratings that were being handed out, they got shut down by the SEC, but not to worry. Over in Hong Kong, they are setting up their own rating agency that will be making the decisions for Asian investors as to whether investments in the United States of America are safe and profitable or not. And so the world is already turning away from S&P and Moody's because we know they lied. They lied to serve their financial masters on Wall Street. They were supposed to be independent. A lot of people had already called attention to the obvious conflict of interest of these financial firms paying the ratings agencies to rate that financial firm's financial offerings. And now we know they lied. They were paid to lie. It's just another form of advertising here. Alrighty, a little story over at silverdoctors.com here. Gold continues to bleed from the COMEX. Apparently another 5 tons of physical gold had to be withdrawn on Monday. And yet we're being told gold and silver prices are just crushed down. It's off 30 days, and you should sell your gold. And they're still trying to play that little game. Don't go into gold and silver. Stay in the stock market. Look how high we've got those numbers run up. And look at the long-term performance of gold. Don't look at how it lost 30 in the last week or whatever, because we know that's being the result of rigging, all these paper contracts that they are flooding the market with. And the London gold and silver fix, emphasis on the word fix, blends the two together. And the contracts are virtually worthless. And they use that to pull down the value of physical. And yet we're seeing physical shortages all over. We heard about a major mining company has shut down production because the cost of getting the gold out of the ground is now more than the physical price is on the market. The shortage should be driving prices up, and they're using fraud to keep the prices down. And as long as they are, now's the time to buy. Gold and silver will go up eventually. Look at the price of gold and silver going back over the last 10, 20 years. Now, for the Wall Street players who live and die on the daily action and the volume and the volatility, and they're gambling addicts, and their entire consciousness is, the next buy, the next sell, gold may not look attractive. But for people like you and I who are wanting to have a hedge against inflation and just have something set aside that's not dependent on ink and paper to deal with an emergency, gold and silver, physical, is a good thing to have on hand. And you can go over to the Republic Trading Group, find their little banner at my website and at the Republic Broadcasting website, and if you buy your physical silver and gold from Republic Trading Group, part of that comes in to help support our operation here at Republic Broadcasting. Because we don't get millions of dollars from Wall Street firms to tell you that this is the stock to buy, and the rest of it. We are entirely funded by the public, you the American people. And so if they're working this hard to keep the gold and silver prices down, this is the time to take advantage of it. In the long run, it will go up. It always does. It always does. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here and checking on my email. A lot of emails coming in. One of them about the idea of gold, because you've probably seen these commercials on TV regarding gold. There are some commercials now from gold dealers saying now's the time to buy in, but we've all seen these very cheaply made late-night commercials. Oh, send us your old, unused gold, broken earrings and stuff. We'll give you a little bit of money for it. And they're very much underpaying for the melt value of the gold. And it's just another way of taking advantage of the imposed financial hardship on the population to strip them of items of real wealth. And the same thing was happening in Germany during the period of the Weimar inflation, when people were desperate to get more of those pieces of paper with ink on them. And these vultures would open up these stores saying, we'll buy your gold and jewelry and we'll give you stacks of paper with ink on it. And, of course, the operators of these stores were just going to the bankers and saying, print me up another stack of ink and paper. We're going to get the gold out there. And that was one of the reasons why the German people were so hostile toward the financial manipulators, is they realized it was a scam. Now, that being said, you've probably, like me, if you've gone down to your local shopping mall, they have these We Buy Gold kiosks right there in the shopping mall. Oh, you've got to celebrate July 4th by buying a new coffee machine at 20% off. You don't have the cash and you don't want to use your credit cards. Bring in those old broken bracelets and stuff you don't want to wear. You wear that heavy jewelry on your wrist, you're going to get scoliosis. You don't want to be wearing all of that stuff and all that other nonsense. But every time I pass by that We Buy Gold kiosk in the mall, it's an empty desk. And I do have a friend who owns a legitimate coin and metals dealership in the neighborhood. I gave him one of those Zimbabwe $100 trillion notes for his little museum collection he's got on the wall there. And he says, nobody wants to sell physical right now. They're paying a premium. They're actually paying over melt value trying to keep items in stock. And they're also selling over premium for physical silver and gold. So it's just out there. You need to understand, by its very nature, the financial system is predatory. It does not serve the public. It does not serve the nation. It serves only itself. And whatever they think they can get away with, they'll get away with. I think a good example of that, of course, are all these online auction sites. You've seen the TV commercials for that. It started with Quibids. Now there's a whole bunch of lookalikes where you can get a brand new iPad for only $65 on our auction site. And, of course, what it is, it's a form of legalized gambling, because you have to pay for every one of your bids on the item, and that's where they make their money. By the time they sell that $500 iPad for $60, they've made $2,000 charging for the bids to the auction site. And it's a form of online gambling, but it's legal because they're not paying out in money, they're paying out in goods. And if you ever study the history of gambling, you will find antique slot machines that paid out with tokens for drinks or cigars, because as long as they weren't paying out in money, they could evade the laws against gambling. But it's still gambling. And it just, again, it shows a complete lack of morality and ethics and concern for society when you see financial sharpsters engaging in actions like this. Now, going over to New York, as I mentioned, tomorrow we're going to be 1 week away from Independence Day. And it's pretty much been stripped of all meaning. I was over at our local big box store, and they've got a big display of American flags to show your pride. And there was only one slot empty. Nobody's buying flags anymore. I think flag waving is definitely a thing of the past here. But over in New York, Mayor Bloomberg, who has been waging his nonstop campaign against fun, to distract from the fact that he's actually not doing a good job running the city. They got a huge homeless problem there. They got massive unemployment. The infrastructure is collapsing all around them. But hey, we're going to go out. We're going to ban the big sodas, and we're going to ban this, and we're going to ban that. And now, of course, he's declared war on sparklers. We're going to declare those things are dangerous. And yeah, they can be. That little wire is very hot when you're done. You've got to supervise the kiddies. And we've gone through that here in Hawaii. Years ago when my wife and I came out here for our honeymoon, we were over the New Year holiday, and I thought it was cool. You could have fireworks for New Year and July 4th and Chinese New Year. And over the last few years, there's been a campaign against fireworks, ostensibly for health reasons, but we know what the reality is. They don't want Americans being familiar with things that have fuses on them and go bang. Trying to demonize fireworks the way they're demonizing guns. Oh, it's a firework. I must run and hide under my bed. And so right now, as we come up on so-called Independence Day, the stores are filled with celebration of the 4th of July, and they're just party poppers. Little piece of cardboard, you pull the string, it goes, a little piece of paper come out the end. We're supposed to think that represents freedom in the United States of America. Absolutely amazing, amazing stuff. You know, and, oh, man, what's wrong with us having fireworks? And the fireworks companies are trying so hard to get around all the various laws. They actually did something stupid a couple of years ago where they had these flying lanterns They weren't exploding. They weren't smoke. They qualified, and it was this big paper bubble. They've even been in TV commercials. You'd light this thing, and it would sort of fly off. Where's it going to come down? I mean, here on the island of Hawaii, if you go down to the leeward shore and you set one off, it's going to fly out over the ocean. But in a big city area, these things are an invitation to fire. And can't we have, the fountains and the little, I remember in Washington State, 4th of July there, we were allowed to buy the little tiny mortars where it would fire up about, 50 feet in the air and go bang. Nobody died. And I miss that stuff. And around here, they're now saying, the fire off, the detonation of anything that goes bang will be treated as an act of violence, and they're just really coming down hard on us. And, when you realize that for the 4th of July, pretty much everybody's going to be working, the stores will be open with their Independence Day sales. The sunglass store is out there with the banner, "Oh, say, can you see?" trying to, maximize the merchandising. It's all merchandising now. We're being told, Independence Day, we're not supposed to remember what it actually represented, which was the day we became independent from the Bank of England and their paper currency loaned at interest. The dependency on the British East India Company. You will buy your goods from there and not from anywhere else. We're getting the same runaround about Monsanto. You will buy your GMO goods and you will like it. And you will not have organic local farms, and you will... we're back in that same situation that the colonies were in back when they signed that Declaration of Independence. Alrighty, let's see. Over in Aurora, Colorado, big scandal there. Apparently, due to poor training, a huge amount of evidence on multiple crimes was accidentally destroyed. And they're going on and on about all these rape cases where the DNA evidence has been destroyed, and now they're not even going to bring the guy to trial. The question that is unanswered, was any of this evidence from that Colorado theater shooting that has so many funny aspects to the story? Did that get lost in all of this? We're going to grab a phone call here. Carrie in Florida. Aloha, Carrie. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Hello, Carrie. Are you there? There you are.
I do every day. Am I still here?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay. When you were talking about the gambling, about the cigars and the drinks and so forth, that it was absence of morality. And given your take, I understand the New Testament isn't the bee's knees. I don't know what to say now. It's not. One can get morality without reading the Bible. However, I've heard you talk about the fairy tales and so forth and so on. So when you mentioned morality, that struck a nerve with me, sir. And how can you explain that, please, with your absence of the New Testament teachings or even the Old Testament? Of course, not the Talmud. But,
well, Carrie, I think you're proceeding from a false assumption that only religious people can be moral. And people who are free of religion can decide that there needs to be a code of morality because rationally it is what protects society as a whole. Now, specific to the issue of gambling, we know because of the work of psychologists like B.F. Skinner that gambling is addictive because of what is called intermittent reinforcement. The entire city of Las Vegas and Reno and Monte Carlo are all built on this exploitation of this human behavior. That intermittent reinforcement can lead to an addictive pattern. And I think anything that exploits an addictive pattern, whether it is gambling, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, anything has to be seen as immoral because the purveyors of these goods and services and products are taking advantage of human physiology in a way where the subjects that they're selling their products to are, by the nature of their own biology, unable to resist.
That's perfectly logical, Michael. And I'm torn now. I'm just now studying the Bible, so forgive me. However, I always thought that people were born bad and they had to learn to be good. And now, without a basis of some baselines here, I mean, where would these baselines come from know, the New Testament, okay, or Bob's Guide to Better Living, or whatever you want to say. Where would this morality come from if people didn't read and if they didn't think?
Well, I agree with the part about think. But remember, there have been all kinds of civilizations that didn't even hear of Jesus Christ who were moral, because they simply got together and, over time they would evolve. This is what works best for our society, and we will teach the children as they're growing up. This is moral behavior, and yes, it's different from culture to culture to culture. But again, you don't have to have a god or gods in order to be a moral person. If you do think, as you just yourself said, and realize there are certain codes of conduct and behavior that are conducive to the smooth functioning of society as a whole. And you don't have to have religion to do that, and certainly looking at all these clergy running around molesting little children, I wouldn't hold them up as the authoritative source on morality anyway. But the idea that you must be religious to be moral is completely nonsense. I'm not religious, but I consider myself a very moral human being.
How would one learn, again, I'll ask the question again, how would one learn morality? And in the absence of, for instance, a book like the New Testament, and you mentioned there have been many civilizations that were moral. I can't think of any. I'm not a
well,
student.
I think what you're doing is you're judging these other civilizations by whether they have the same morality that you do, and I concede they do not. But ancient Rome viewed murder as wrong and stealing as wrong. Ancient Egypt viewed murder and stealing as wrong. And we don't necessarily have to learn that morality. Somewhere early on, somebody, in charge of a village or a tribe finally stood up and said, the idea of my people going around and taking things from other people's property is causing all kinds of problems and dissension. I therefore think we need a moral guidance code here about stealing other people's property. And it was not revealed, it was not taught, it was not in some kind of holy writ. It's just sitting there and managing an evolving society and saying there are some rules we all need to agree to, in order for society to function a little better. Now, in an illiterate culture, religion did serve a good purpose of saying, do what we tell you or the gods will smite you. But as we moved into a literate culture and a rational culture, people are able to come to their own conclusion that certain moral codes are an acceptable trade to be living in an organized society that is taking care of the common good. And so we don't need religion to teach morality anymore when we lived in an enlightened age where we can look around and pretty much decide for ourselves there are certain rules we can all agree on. We shouldn't be killing. We shouldn't be stealing. We shouldn't be lying to our friends and neighbors. We shouldn't defraud them. We should protect the children. I think we all pretty much agree on that. And you need to understand a lot of morality is a sales tool. And I was talking about this the other day, where babies are not born being shocked at the sight of naked people. That's taught to us in order to fuel the clothing industry. And the example I use here is out here in Hawaii, where, originally people just ran around naked and never thought about it. And all these Christian missionaries came out and said, oh, it's immoral to be running around naked here. And by the way, I just opened up a new clothing store over here, which you will pay for the clothing to save yourself from going to the dark regions by going over and working at this plantation the other missionary just started over there. And so some of these moral codes that we see are really just sales tools, but I think it's up to every human being to really decide for themselves what they see as a moral code. And there's a great deal of commonality. I think for the most part we all agree. Killing is wrong. Stealing is wrong. Lying is wrong. Society can't function unless we're all in agreement on those.
Everybody doesn't agree that most ancient cultures practiced human sacrifice of children, and you mean
like the U.S. is doing with these drone strikes in Pakistan and Yemen?
No. We're going back to history, please, Michael. Please, I understand. I was in Vietnam. I know. I was duped. I was terrified as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old boy. I understand what's going on now, but as far as morality, there's a baseline. So there has to be a base. I'm thinking maybe I am a scientist, and I'm thinking maybe there must be a baseline for someone to understand right versus wrong. Without that baseline, they don't get it. Religious leaders are I understand, churches, Mayan gods, whatever, the shamas, whatever, witch doctors, whatever you want to call them. It was all wrong. Of course it was. Of course it was.
Well, you were talking about human sacrifice. That was always being promoted by the religious leaders. And as the world moved away from rule by divine right or rule by the church into more secular governments, human sacrifice went away.
Well, it had to, because people were tired of it, I think.
No, they moved away from it because the people that were now in control of society weren't running around saying, sacrifice your mother-in-law to the deity to cleanse your soul. And again, the moral code changed because people were looking at what was optimum for society. Sorry to cut you off. We've got to take a commercial break, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to take another phone call here. Patricia in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike. I was listening to your previous caller talk about morality and religion, and I just thought I would put my 2 cents in. From what I understand, the 10 Commandments really were a gauge to gauge if you are in touch with your inner wisdom, your inner love. If you are, you cannot kill, you cannot steal, you cannot harm another person. And yet, religions, which are actually businesses, do continue that morality play myth about the Bible. And what really the masters have always stressed in every religion, all around the world, is that there's something inside of you that is absolutely pristine, absolutely innocent, pure, perfect. I mean, when a child is born, that child is not a wild animal who needs to be trained and socialized. You know, he just needs to be given a good example of how to live on planet Earth, just by his parents living well. But you know, we're taught that children need to be restrained and oppressed and suppressed.
Well, they need to be socialized, which is another word for domesticated. Now, in my view, we are born as the sum of all of our evolutionary history, and we are deeply conflicted because we do have very primitive instincts for grabbing and survival and so forth, but it is balanced by our instinct for altruism, for forming societies and larger groups. And we're sort of at this horrible transitionary point from the primitive to the altruistic. But when you talk about inner love, I think that's another word for our sense of altruism, that we do have an obligation to our fellow human being on this world. And obviously, you know, when you have parents who are raising children, they want to reinforce the altruistic, and occasionally kids are going to act out on some of their other instincts as we guide them forward. The problem we have in our society right now is the parents are being disconnected from the children in order to make the children more malleable by governments and corporations to be permanent consumers, permanent warriors, permanent debt slaves. And I think that's definitely, I think that is a big part of what screws up our kids.
Human love.
Okay.
I was talking about, there's a line in the Bible that says it all, and that is that God is love. And then in the very, very beginning of Genesis it says, and God said, let us make man in our own image and likeness, which is love, which is light, which is peace. And so that is really what we are made of. We only learn how to be anything else by example. And one of my big causes is circumcision, for instance. And that teaches a little baby that he's not safe.
Well, no, I have to take issue with that, and unfortunately I'm going to have my comments as we come back from station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And this is not really a subject I wanted to get into, but as long as that last caller brought it up, the reality is that ancient cultures where infant mortality was very high, and they were always concerned about being able to produce as many children as possible, because especially in an agricultural community, your children represent real wealth. You get them to do the chores. And the more babies you can have, the better. And it was discovered probably by a horrible, embarrassing accident that men who are absent the epididymis were able to engage in sex more often and contribute their genetic material more often and therefore produce more babies. And I think that's where that all came from. And there are compelling medical reasons even today for certain men to undergo circumcision that are rooted in medical necessity and not religion, and it doesn't cheapen your image. It just makes sex more fun. Anyway, we're going to grab another phone call here. Michael in North Carolina. Aloha, Michael. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Doing fine.
Am I really following up circumcision?
I'm sorry. You want to call back later? We'll talk about the FBI death ray scandal, and you can call back after that.
That's a hard road to hoe, but
it's a tough act to follow.
Two things about the NSA deal. It's amazing to me that they can even talk about just collecting metadata, because as you and I know, that any program that is admitted to is always worse than it is.
Oh, well, we're already finding that out. The admissions so far are a form of limited hangout, where you're accused of a great crime and you say, well, we'll confess to the little crime and hopefully they'll go away. But again, that's a known propaganda technique and it's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, you know what's funny is it's horrible because, I preach it to the choir every day. Mm-hmm. Every person I can grab, every venue I can do it. And it's just, I don't know how the average person who lives the average life just doesn't go, whoa, wait a minute.
Well,
I don't understand how that happens.
We're seeing the symptoms that people are struggling with even if they don't know the fine details, they understand something's gone horribly wrong with this country, and I think the indicator of that is the alcohol section at your local drugstore or supermarket. One of the markets we go to just put in a huge, new, even taller, bigger, more grandiose section for the alcohol, and that was a symptom that they saw in the former Soviet Union. As it got closer and closer to the collapse of that regime, alcohol abuse was just rampant all across the Soviet Union. And so the fact that alcohol consumption is very much on the increase here in the United States, I think indicates people are aware at some level that something has gone wrong. A lot of them are trying to avoid it. Good reason to get a scotch on that one. But I do see that increase in alcoholism as a major symptom that the population is struggling with this paradigm disconnect between what they're told this country is all about and what it demonstrably is.
Yeah, it's very disturbing because when you can point to things and you can provide documentation and you can tell somebody and you can show them physically, hey, listen, this is what is going on, and there's just nothing there. It's just, well, I don't want to see that. I don't want to care about it. I'm just going to walk away from it. But when you see a gross violation of the Fourth Amendment, like we have in the First Amendment, by this NSA scandal, I mean, I just don't understand why people.
Well, most people are. Stay with me, Michael. I'm going to come back to you after this commercial break. Okay, we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Michael in North Carolina, and there are people who just don't want to know. They want to go on believing we're the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we're the good guys, and all those other people are bad guys, and they deserve to be tortured and drone struck and all the rest of that. That is, thankfully, a rapidly dwindling minority, and that is certainly in large part due to this NSA scandal, because now all those people in military service are realizing that their romantic phone calls back to their significant other from the war zone were all being saved and recorded and listened to by the NSA. Every single American who was ever on a business trip and talking sexy to their spouse back at home now realizes it was not a private phone call. This gentleman who called in earlier to the show and said that, he was on this bogus group at Facebook that was into M&Ms or something like that. his NSA profile says, was looking at this group that's into M&Ms and all the rest of that other stuff. And there's a lot of domain hijacking that goes on. There are people who have set up porn websites that are just one spelling mistake away from my website, and there's even one that was set up that's one spelling mistake away from the whitehouse.gov. And if you accidentally mistype and you wind up on that porn site, the NSA has a record you're visiting porn sites. And Americans are now realizing that not only is everything that they're doing being spied on and saved, a lot of it is full of errors that could come back to haunt them. And so most Americans are aware of it. And as you go through life talking to people around you, if you meet somebody who just clearly doesn't want to know, don't waste time trying to convince them. And if you meet somebody who's there who's going to argue with you endlessly, that's probably one of the FBI's numerous informants. They've got a higher percentage of informants in this country than the Stasi had in East Germany. Don't waste your time with them. Find the people who are starting to ask questions about what's going along and talk to them and get the conversations going that way. It's the human net. It's the one form of mass communication in this country the NSA can't monitor and stop and censor. Anything else, Michael?
Yeah, just a general comment about the whole NSA scandal is, and I think you're absolutely right. I think you need to appeal to people that are awake, people that pay attention, and the people that don't are really a lost cause. But unfortunately, that is probably the majority of people that are roaming around our planet right now.
That's certainly not my experience. That is not my experience around here. I since this whole NSA thing came out, I haven't met anybody who isn't just furious about this. And maybe you're running in different circles that I am, but I sort of presumed that because Hawaii has such a high per capita military presence, that, I was going to run into people and say, well, it's just and it's necessary to protect the national security. But no, even the military people I'm talking to, they're furious that what they thought were private communications to their family were all being monitored and scanned. It's a slap in the face. These military people see themselves as loyal supporters of the United States of America no matter what it does. And now to find that same government doesn't trust them and is monitoring their phone calls, that's upset a lot of people around here.
Yeah, and Michael, you don't have to tell me about that. I've been deployed, so yeah, that kind of infuriates me also. But no, I'm talking more about the mainstream media commentary about the subject. I mean,
the corporate media isn't the mainstream. The corporate media, I'm sorry to cut you off, the corporate media isn't the mainstream any longer. Their audience, viewership, readership, listenership numbers are all down in the Al-Qaeda. The numbers here in the independent media, my server numbers are going up. And they're not the mainstream, and you shouldn't judge the opinion of the American public based on what the corporate media is telling you, because the corporate media is selling you next year's car, next year's president, next year's war. And America now realizes that.
There's no doubt about that, but, I mean, still a lot of people pay attention to that. I mean, I don't. I mean, predominantly I get my news from overseas, but two quick things, Mike. I took my phone from the microwave to call you. And then the second one is I paid $142 to buy a Lamborghini Diablo online the other day.
Okay. Well, if you'd gotten a Bugatti Veyron, my wife would be calling you up because that's her favorite fantasy car. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Chris in Washington. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yes. Hello, Mike. I'm wondering if I just get this unavoidable sense that this summer of 2013 is the high water mark of the political financial response to the global meltdown of 5 years ago, because nothing systemic has changed.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, it seems to be that all the policies have failed to ignite a self-sustaining recovery in the real economy, and that there's no policy options left. So what can they do if all the policies have failed?
Well, the policies have all failed because the one thing they would not challenge is the root cause of all of this problem, a private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest. And everything this government has done has been 180 degrees out of phase with what would have worked. Instead of taking trillions from the American people to give to the Wall Street banks to loan back to the people at interest, if they'd gone to Wall Street, whose mortgage-backed security fraud precipitated this crisis, and taken trillions from them and sent it back to the American people, nobody would have missed a mortgage payment. There wouldn't have been a mortgage meltdown. There wouldn't be a housing crisis. People would have stayed up to date on their credit cards. We wouldn't have had a credit crisis. People would have gone on down to those shopping malls and bought a brand new American-made whatever. There wouldn't be a retail crisis and a manufacturing crisis. People would have gone out and bought new American-made cars. Wouldn't have needed the automotive bailout. But because our government is in service to the money junkies and will not challenge their religion of private central banking, everything that they did was simply to try and look like they're solving the problem of the American people, and clearly they did not solve the problem, and they won't until they do an Andrew Jackson and shut that private bank down again.
Yeah, it just seems to be the numbers are being juiced because even though Japan's stock market rose 75% since December and the U.S. S&P climbed 24% in 2013, the U.S. corporations didn't suddenly become 25% more profitable, and Japan's economy did not expand by 75% in 5 months.
No, the earnings do not support those numbers. It's all the result of intervention and rigging. We've known about the plunge protection team since the Clinton administration. We know how the high-frequency traders are able to manipulate the market, and the government is going along with this because the alternative is to let the whole system collapse. And there's going to come a time, and it may well, as you say, be this summer, and we're about halfway through summer right now, where all the rigging just isn't going to work, and there's going to be a panic and a mass sell-off, and this whole system's going to come crashing down. And the U.S. government is going to turn to you, the American people, and say one more time, you're going to have to make do with less so we can have more. They're going to come after your gold and silver, the way Roosevelt did, and say we need to give it to the banks because banks are more important than people in the United States government's worldview. And no sacrifice by the people is too great to keep the Wall Street financial system, high in the esteem of the rest of the world. And it's a juggling act. I mean, earlier in the show we were talking about how they've had to revise downward the numbers for the gross domestic product for the first quarter of 2013. And they're always coming out with this announcement, things are great, and then a few months later they say, well, they weren't really great, but we've got a new bunch of great numbers to dazzle you with.
The new numbers are you take one full-time job and turn it into 1.5 or 2 part-time jobs, and voila, the unemployment rate declines and the number of jobs increases. I don't understand how they can continue to put the smoke and mirrors up before even the most, the dumbest of people finally figure it out.
Well, that's the point at which the smoke and mirrors stop working, when the majority of the American public finally accept in their gut that it's all smoke and mirrors, that this government lies because they don't know what else to do. The corporate media, the prostitutes are the lackeys of the government, the Ministry for Truth, whatever you want to call them. And we're nearing that point, and this NSA scandal has certainly moved us along that path.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks for taking my call.
All right, you got it there. And let's see. Phone lines appear to be open, I think. Now, there was a very interesting article over at the BBC, the British Buggering Children, the British Broadcasting Corporation here, and the headline was a little misleading because it says, U.S. bloggers banned from entering Great Britain. And it's a little misleading because they're trying to sell you the idea that the fact that they're bloggers is why they were blocked from entering Great Britain. But actually, the individuals involved are Pamela Geller and Robert Spencer. And they were blocked from entering the U.K. not because they are bloggers, but because their espoused position on Israel and Muslims was considered not conducive to the public good. And governments do have a right to say, look, if you're going to come in and cause trouble and cause unrest, we don't want you here. Because obviously Pamela Geller and her ilk would like to goad the Muslims into acts of civil disobedience that can be used to further demonize Muslims around the world. And you need to remember, Pamela Geller is on record saying that if Iran attacks Israel, Israel should nuke Europe in retaliation. And I'm sure the nations of Europe, are going to take exception to that comment. And by the way, can you imagine what the reaction of the American corporate media would be if a supporter of Iran were to issue a statement, if Israel attacks Iran, Iran should nuke Europe. Oh, boy, those gosh darned Iranians. By the way, Israel has now dropped its official policy of denying their nuclear power. Apparently, they were having a debate about their nuclear weapons in the Knesset just a few days ago, and that, of course, is a complete reversal of the policy that Israel, even internally, never acknowledges the existence of their nuclear arsenal. Now they're talking about it in the Knesset, so this idea that nobody really knows if Israel has nukes or not is now gone. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking at the email, and apparently the where's Snowden is continuing, and, you know, is he living at the airport while Ecuador decides his asylum status and so forth and so on. Kind of like a real-life version of the Tom Hanks movie, The Terminal, where because of paperwork screw-ups, he has to live at the airport for a long time. I don't think that's going to happen. And I got to tell you right now, I don't think Snowden is going to Ecuador. I think it's another in an endless series of feints to keep from being drone bait. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Don in Ohio. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. With all the problems that you've had with Skype and, you know, now that they're basically, you know, giving the farm away to the government and stuff like that on everything you do on it, I was wondering if you ever heard of something called Jitsi. It's Jitsi.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good alternative to Skype is what they say. It's, you want me to read it real quick?
Well, you know, we need to take the focus off of the individual applications, which are backdoored. Yes, we know that, and realize the NSA is plugged into the actual backbone of the Internet itself. So it almost doesn't matter what app you're using. Now, as far as Skype and my radio show is concerned, they don't need to be backdooring my Skype to hear what I'm saying. They just can go over to republicbroadcasting.org. But you need to understand the whole system is compromised from end to end to end, and if you have something to hide and you need secure communications, you have to take steps to protect your own privacy. And again, we're not here supporting terrorism or criminality. We are protecting our business secrets from a government that provably cannot be trusted with that information. And we have a legitimate right to privacy. The Fourth Amendment says that we do. And I think every single American who's not involved in terror or criminality, and let's face it, the terrorists and the criminals are already using secure communication anyway, but we have a right to protect our personal lives and our personal business from a government that is snooping just for the heck of it.
On the 9/11 image, did you guys come up with the favor? Or?
You mean for the billboard? No, we were in the top 10, but they chose another design, but they sent me a bunch of cool T-shirts. Okay,
how about this idea, too? Have Marbury versus Madison on a T-shirt, you know, describe what it is, you know, any unconstitutional law is, you know, whatever, and then have RBN on the back, you know, rbn.com and or org, and, you know.
Oh, well, we'd like to do that. I mean, I'm always coming up with new T-shirts for my own website and coffee mugs and everything. But, and, you know, it's a good idea to put Marbury versus Madison on there. But I think Marbury versus Madison is something that enters the discussion when you're talking to somebody who already knows things have gone wrong in this country. And so the T-shirts really ought to be about luring people in to talk to you, so that you can talk to them about that other stuff. If they just see Marbury versus Madison, they're going to stop reading at that particular point. But, you know, and again, my idea for the design for the billboard was simply the picture of World Trade Center 7, and the text copy was, Arabs did 9/11, and if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you, which hammered home the point that there was a Building 7, that there were questions about the official story about Arabs doing 9/11, and a reminder that the government has been caught lying to us before.
Yep. Okay, have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Phone lines are open right now. Let's get over to Syria, because everybody else is on their way over there right now. And there's a very interesting editorial over at originalantiwar.com called Syria and the Monarchs, A Perfect Storm. And it is underscoring the fact that the United States hired mercenaries are rapidly evolving into a future government for Syria that is going to be virulently anti-American. They're already talking about Sharia law. and all of the rest of that. Now, we know what the American plan was. The American government has already sort of put together this group of people that they're already saying is going to be the new Syrian government, and the U.S. agenda is they're going to give guns and ammunition and bullets to all these hired mercenaries who are going to topple Assad and then turn around and kick them out and put this new puppet regime in. And I don't think the hired mercenaries, now that they see the door open to the ruling classes of Syria open to them, they're not going to turn around and walk out. They're going to say, hey, we're it. You know, what are you going to do, invade Syria a second time? And so this could very easily turn out to be a major foreign policy disaster, even if the U.S. does succeed in kicking Assad out. Now, inevitably, of course, the United States and Russia fail to reach a deal on new Syria peace talks because the United States doesn't want peace. If they wanted peace in Syria, they would stop signing all those checks for all the guns and bombs and bullets, and certainly the paychecks for those hired mercenaries. And they're going through the motions so they can go on saying, oh, we really want peace in Syria as long as it has our favored regime in power there. Interesting story over in ruvr.russia, or .ru, where they're basically coming out with information. This is based on statements from Professor Michael Chusodovsky, my mistake, director of the Center for Research on Globalization, and comments by Professor, and he's also Professor Emeritus of Ottawa University, told the Voice of Russia that the U.S. was also supplying chemical weapons to the hired mercenaries to carry out chemical weapon attacks to blame on Assad. So, we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And this here's a story for all you gun grabbers out there that think guns are bad. Apparently, there's a company up in Dalton Gardens, Idaho, that is now selling a line of bullets coated with a paint that contains pork, to be used to shoot those Muslims and keep them from going to heaven, because in their religion, if you come in contact with pork, it counts against you when you go to your 47 raisins or whatever it is you're supposed to be getting there. And I found this story in the British press. No mention of this at all in the American corporate media about this company that is coming out with these pork-laced bullets to use on Muslims. Now, if this article stated these were bullets to use against Jews who are also religiously prohibited from contact with pork, imagine the firestorm of protest and screaming and more phone calls saying you're a Jew-hating network would just result as that. You have to think, what are these people thinking? And I don't expect that this is actually going to really be all that popular. But it shows just how absurd some of this stuff gets. We've got pork bullets here. And even worse, it's GMO. Alrighty, getting back to the situation in Syria, which is rapidly deteriorating, we are seeing a few brave souls in Congress, meaning those that the NSA doesn't have phone recordings of talking to Fifi's phone fantasies in the dead of night. They're trying to basically reassert congressional control over the war process, and they are right to do so, because under the Constitution, Congress must be declared by, or rather, war must be declared by Congress. The President, under the War Powers Act, can deploy U.S. military forces to deal with a crisis for 30 days. After 30 days, he's got to get the permission of Congress to move forward. Now, the War Powers Act was created in an age before instantaneous global communication, and I would argue that the time limit for the President to deploy to another country could be cut down to a single week, because within a week you can get all the members of Congress to say, we approve, we don't approve. So the Congressman Walter Jones has introduced a resolution to declare the use of military force in Syria without the approval of Congress to be an impeachable offense, and he's absolutely right. There is no military crisis in Syria that allows the President to invade the country under the War Powers Act. The War Powers Act specifically relates to invasions or attacks on U.S. interests. And Syria is not attacking U.S. interests. It's simply the last stepping stone on the much lusted for war with Iran. And so we're seeing some members of Congress backing off on this because they understand more wars are not going to be approved of by the majority of the American people. These could even be election losers next year and in 2016. The American people are tired of war, and they're aware that these wars are not to serve the American nation or its people. They're wars for the bankers. And the American people are very tired of seeing their children come home from the war zone in these sealed caskets with the cheap American flag draped over it to make the bankers richer than they already are, which is really what it's all about. None of these nations have attacked us. Iraq didn't nuke us. They didn't have nuclear weapons. Iran hasn't attacked us, and based on their history, they have no desire for doing so. These are all wars of aggression to seize control of natural resources, to force the world back to Bretton Woods, where the dollar is the unchallenged global currency and everybody buys and sells everything through the U.S. dollar. That's what it's all about. Russia is now deploying one of their intelligence gathering ships, one of their largest, off the coast of Syria. Yesterday they were talking about negotiations with Cyprus for the Russians to use one of their air bases, and my last understanding is Cyprus agreed. So now the Russians have an air base in the eastern Mediterranean. They're sending a very clear, unmistakable message for the United States: don't go any further. I don't know about you. I don't want to get into a war with Russia. They really do have weapons of mass destruction. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Bill in Texas. Aloha, Bill. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
All right, thank you. Well, I got two items. I'll be quick. I'm at work. I could be mistaken, but wasn't it Flight 800 where apparently there was a videotape from the backup system that showed an intermittent radar trace coming from the ground? And yes, everybody was going, oh, no, that's fake, that's fake. I don't know if it was or wasn't.
No, there were a couple of radar tracks, and actually we do have them at my TWA 800 page, which after the show today I'm going to reorganize it because I was looking at it and it was sort of ad hoc as it was happening, and I'm going to reorganize it so it presents the information a little bit better. But, yes, there were radar tracks.
And the other point is I've been listening to this network for years, even long before you came on the first time. And I've only heard things about bad governments, not about individual religions being bad or groups of people, just bad governments, including our own. So I just wanted to throw that out there that, you know, I haven't heard anything negative about the Jewish religion itself, just about a bad government.
Well, you're absolutely correct. But, you know, Israel's propaganda policy is to always equate criticism of Israel's government with anti-Semitism and Jew hate, and you want to bring back the ovens and the gas chambers. And again, if you go back to that video over at Democracy Now!, where this former member of the Knesset says, yeah, it's just a trick. When people are saying things about Israel that we cannot reply to, we scream anti-Semite to shut them up. And that's what all these phone calls into Republic Broadcasting saying, oh, you're a Jew-hating network. And again, and I got emails on this one just today, all this week, 3 days, we've had these calls. We haven't said anything about the Jewish faith or Jewish ethnicity. The calls are even coming in ahead of when I talk about Israel in my talking points. But they always come as soon as we start talking about 9/11, and it's a flashing neon sign that Israel is terrified that the official story of 9/11 is not being accepted by the population of the United States and by the population of the world. And, you know, who's next on that line? Remember, the only people actually arrested near the World Trade Center on 9/11 were these Mossad agents, the so-called dancing Israelis. You know, who basically, they shot that video of the first plane hitting the World Trade Towers that is still to this day classified. Because if they were there in time for that first impact, then they knew what was coming. And again,
well,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say the evidence is fairly clear that they knew in advance. I don't know if they were involved. I don't know that much. But the fact that, you know, that and the text messages sent out or maybe they were pagers back then.
No, you're probably talking about Odigo. Now, Odigo is an Israeli-linked company that handles a lot of backbone traffic for instant messaging services, which is how Israel keeps track on what you're texting to each other. And they had an office in New York, very near the World Trade Center, that received a text message saying, "Get the heck out of there." And the message came in before the airplanes used in the 9/11 attacks had even left the ground. And so the FBI came in and they got the issuing IP. Where did this text message come from? And it just sort of went away. They probably have it stashed in a back closet with all of that unofficial evidence from TWA 800.
It's in the same place that the Iraq oil is going to pay for the war. That never happened. Well, I got to go. Thank you.
All right,
keep
thanks
up the
an
good
awful
work.
lot. Yes. Oh, you, the American people, won't pay for the Iraq war and the reconstruction. Iraq's oil money will pay for it. Well, you got lied to about that one as well. Henry Kissinger is out there basically stating that his ideal is that Syria should be balkanized, break it into little tiny pieces that will never, ever be a threat to almighty Israel. They're trying to do that up in Iraq. That's not working. Certainly part of the plan for Iran. You know, we've got to, Israel and its paranoia can't trust any other large nations around there. They've all got to be little tiny pieces of broken tile that Israel can walk all over whenever they feel like it. We already talked about Russia getting that air base on Cyprus. You probably already heard about the attacks in Afghanistan against the presidential palace. They don't like their new U.S.-approved puppet regime of Hamid Karzai, El Presidente de Uno Cal. Apparently, they burned the CIA office up there. My response to that is, get the marshmallows. And so Afghanistan is starting to fall apart over there. Seeing the emergence of a new armed resistance in Kashmir. And the African Union is now warning that Libya, since the U.S. overthrow of Gaddafi, has now become a hub for terrorism. And we've been hearing that with Syria, that, Libya has become the transship point for the U.S. covert conquest of pretty much that whole part of the African continent. It's going in and out. And everybody knows it. Egypt is definitely getting into some very, very tense situations, protests and rioting. There is violence between this new revolution against Morsi and Morsi's supporters, and it looks to me like this is another attempt at a covert regime change by the United States, because neither the United States nor Israel has been happy ever since Morsi won his election despite overwhelming vote fraud. Remember how the Elections Commission delayed announcing the winner for day after day after day until they finally realized that if they put the pre-selected, pre-approved puppet into power, the Egyptian people were going to go on revolting. And so they gave them Morsi. And again, looking at it, it's a tiny group of agent provocateurs trying to just kick up this thing about, oh, we don't like Morsi anymore. We want Mubarak light back. And it's got all the marks on it of another U.S. covert overthrow to regain control of Egypt for the benefit of private banking and almighty Israel here. Now, interestingly enough, this was reported over, and this was a video on YouTube, where the former ambassador for Israel came out with a statement, quote, North Korea needs to be wiped off the map. Apparently they're going to throw North Korea back in the mix so that the U.S. government can go on saying, we're not just attacking Arab Muslims, really, this is about weapons of mass destruction. And so this former Israeli ambassador is out there saying North Korea needs to be wiped off the map. They've got him on tape saying that in English. Not a word from the American corporate media about this statement. And you remember back when it was claimed that Ahmadinejad had said Israel should be wiped off the map, and what a huge outcry there was. Oh, he's dangerous, he's crazy, we've got to go and kill him. And it turned out Ahmadinejad hadn't actually said that. When they got video of his speech that he was making, and people who actually know the language translated it, they said, no, that's not what he said at all. And you need to remember, translations are a form of propaganda. One of the biggest offenders is a group called MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute, that will take Arab Muslim media and do translations for free and give it to the Western press. And it's an Israeli propaganda operation. And the translations are always done to demonize Arab Muslims, to make them look like villains, and to always say, oh, poor Israel, they're the poor permanent victims of that. We've got to give them money. We've got to fight their wars. And remember, Israel has now officially admitted, they talked about it in the Knesset, they are a nuclear power. They don't need any more of your money. They don't need your children to die in wars on their enemies. We got to get that message to our government as well. So we're going to get another Jew-hating network phone call in 5, 4, 3, 2. Anyway, here. The former head of the CIA is out there screaming to Obama, time to strike North Korea. So it looks like they're just trying to get this world war cranked up any way they can. We're going to attack Syria. Well, we can't do Syria. Russia's protecting them. Let's go to North Korea. That'll get us into war with China, and that's just as good as war with Iran. We'll get that gosh darn gold-backed yuan out of the global marketplace and keep the world safe for the U.S. dollar here. They're just desperate to start a war, which reminds me, we were talking about yesterday that despite the high likelihood it would not be believed in the first place, that we should be concerned and on the alert for some kind of a false flag attack by the U.S. or Israel on this coming 4th of July holiday. And we put up this little poll earlier at our website about, what do you think is the most likely target? Where do you think the U.S., Israel will stage the next false flag attack? Let's see. Looks like White House got most of the votes because there are 2 movies about that. Olympus Has Fallen and now White House Down. I guess it's coming out this weekend, and I don't intend to see either one of those things. Second place was the Golden Gate Bridge because it's 80 years old. Third place, Statue of Liberty, because liberty is a politically incorrect idea anyway. Let's see, Detroit, we're not using that anyway, and so they got 27 votes, and on and on and on. But at least it gets people talking about this, because we know false flag attacks are just a fact of history, where politicians will just use whatever big scary thing they can come up with to get you to go along with what they want. And it goes all the way back to ancient Rome, to Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, inventor of the fire department, sort of, kind of, technically. Long story behind that. And he used the fear in the Roman public's mind caused by the Spartacus slave revolt to get himself voted extraordinary emergency powers, which he never gave up. And basically, Marcus Licinius Crassus marks the beginning of the transition from the Roman Republic ruled by the people, or at least by the Senate, to the age of the emperors. We know what wackos most of those people turned out to be. Now, you've heard about Israel's Iron Dome missile, which actually during the last stomping of Gaza proved out to be not all that effective. But apparently they're ready to go on to the new one called Magic Wand. Oh, thank you for all the money you gave us for Iron Dome here. Not really working the way we thought it was going to. We need more money for Magic Wand. And apparently they debuted it at the Paris Air Show. And so they're already out there getting ready to sell these things to other countries. Right now, Israel is the world's 6th largest military exporter. And much of that is technology that you, the American taxpayer, paid to research and develop. And then they just give it to Israel, and Israel turns around and sells it. Such a deal! Still backlash from that UNICEF report. Israel is the only nation that systematically arrests, abuses, tortures, rapes, and kills children. And Israel supporters are out there saying, oh, you're an anti-Semite, you're a Hitler lover, you're a Jew hater. We're going to go on doing it, but you shouldn't talk about it. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the other day we were talking about John McAfee, who was the original creator of the McAfee antivirus product. He sold out his company, took his money, and retired. And he made a humorous video on the correct way to get McAfee antivirus off your computer, because these days, under its new ownership, and this is true of all these security software systems, getting them out of your computer when you want to change products or you just realize it's causing more problems than it's solving is very, very difficult. And so he made this humorous video about the correct way to get McAfee out of your computer. And I guess because of the public awareness of the NSA spying and everything, it's actually been picked up by the corporate media, and I think that's great. I like him. He's got a great sense of humor. I think he's doing really good. All right, we're coming up here on the end of our show, and I think it's important for all of us, especially as we're in this last week before the 4th of July holiday. We need to reach out to the human net. You need to take it upon yourself to go out and just look for the Americans who are starting to ask those important questions. And there's a lot of them out there. With the revelation about TWA 800, where the investigators were ordered by the government to lie to the people about what brought that airplane down. The questions about 9/11 itself, and especially with all this NSA spying on every single living American, Americans have woken up to what's going on. And yes, there's still a few who are out there in denial, and there's the inevitable segment of the population that are, working as informants for the FBI and think they're doing something really great, and they go home and abuse themselves to old James Bond movies. But for the rest of them, which is about, I think, 90% of the population, who are starting to ask the questions, take it upon yourself to start providing the answers. Don't overwhelm them. Just answer their questions. Remember, you can't push somebody across a bridge, but you can stand on the other side and you can beckon them forward. So it takes a gentle approach, and just, answer their questions, and don't throw a bunch of and also, because you'll overwhelm them, and their defense mechanisms and denial will kick back in. But find the people who are starting to ask questions about what's really been going on with the economy, what's really going on with all these wars, and guide them to where they can find the answers. And that is, of course, whatreallyhappened.com, republicbroadcasting.org, and all of these other resources out here in the independent media. And warn them ahead of time. There's a lot of government propaganda out there trying to mess things up, with chemtrails and HAARP and Bigfoot and Elvis and his UFO and all the rest of that stuff. But most Americans, I trust to be intelligent and perceptive enough. Once they're aware they're being lied to, they're going to learn to see through the lies very quickly, and they're going to learn to recognize the truth when they see it. I think we're in the final stages of the history of the United States of America as it currently exists, and I think we need to be seriously thinking about the blueprint for the new America. What kind of a nation do we want to leave to our children? And on that thought, I'm going to leave you off here. We'll be back tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well, stay skeptical, make good choices. Please support Republic Broadcasting all you can. We are dependent on your kindness and generosity, and aloha, America.